in our first portion of today's session, Increasing B2C Awareness with Experience-Driven Commerce, our SMEs will go through a brief presentation, and then we'll get to the roundtable discussion. So please mute yourself until we open it up for the roundtable discussion, which will start in about 20-25 minutes. We are recording the presentation portion of today to share with those who couldn't make the session, or for those of you who want to review it again. But as a matter of policy, we don't record live conversations. So we will stop recording once we start the roundtable discussion. But if you do have any questions during the presentation portion, go ahead and put them in the chat or jot them down. And that's really what the roundtable discussion is all about, to answer your questions and have a good conversation. So as I think everyone knows, this first session is part of a series. 2 weeks ago, we did have our intro to give everyone an overview of what experience-driven commerce is and what the various sessions are going to look like. But just as a reminder to sort of set the stage of how we define experience-driven commerce, and it's really going to be foundational to today's conversation and the subsequent conversation, is we really think it's rooted in culture. And we're looking at experience-driven commerce as really the result of an organization that evolves from a siloed, manual, transactional approach to a customer-centric, insights-informed, omni-channel mindset that drives growth by enabling meaningful customer relationships. Which sounds very formal, but we're going to talk a lot today about how you do that at the awareness stage of the customer lifecycle. So the agenda today, and you'll see this as a common thread throughout our conversations and sessions, is we want to answer the what, why, and how for you, give you some examples of what it is, who's doing it right, who's doing it, not as great as they could be. Why invest in experience-driven commerce at the awareness stage? What is the, the benefit to the customers, but what are the benefits to the business, of course? And then give you a quick overview of some capabilities that should be in place in order to get to experience-driven commerce at the awareness stage. So that's our agenda, and we'll certainly, like I said, leave a healthy amount of time for discussion. But before we get started and dig in, I want to introduce you to our subject matter experts, starting with Leanne Johnson. Leanne is a digital marketing executive with 15 years of experience in digital strategy, innovation, and data analysis. She's very passionate about exploring consumer motivations and translating them into actionable and accountable strategic marketing plans. Here at Perficient, she has led teams on a range of national and regional projects in a variety of industries, ranging from automotive, luxury, CPG, startups, insurance, and sports. Creating innovative digital and growth strategies that leverage real-time data to continuously test, iterate, and drive results is what she specializes in. And prior to being Perficient, Leanne led the digital team for Milwaukee Bucks, which I think they're doing okay right now, from what I understand. Grant Davies is a principal in our digital strategy practice at Perficient. He specializes in web and mobile strategy, customer experience design, and design thinking. Grant works with all of our clients to develop insights and inform strategies across multiple industries, including healthcare, energy, and manufacturing. And Grant really understands the impact of a great experience and how mobile in particular needs to fit into a client overall customer experience. And finally, Eric Enga is a principal in the digital marketing practice for Perficient. OG Digital Marketing. He designs, studies, and produces industry-related research to help prove, debunk, or evolve assumptions about digital marketing practices and their value. Eric is a writer, blogger, researcher, teacher, and keynote speaker at major industry conferences. He partners with several other experts like he is doing today, and Eric served as a lead author of the book, The Art of SEO. So I'm going to hand it off to the team here and stop talking, and we look forward to your conversation at the end of the presentation. Leanne.
Thanks, Kim. So I will kick us off and start with the what. And really, when we thought about what awareness means to experience-driven commerce, it's really about that starting the conversation, right, with the right audience, in the right space, with the right messaging, done so quickly. And we'll dig into that a little bit more. So really, the frame of the what is helping define and anchor what we mean when we say awareness as it relates to experience-driven commerce, highlighting some opportunities as we see it, and then talking through some leaders and laggers in the space, really kind of trying to provide some tactical, tangible examples of who we think's doing it well, based on where they are at, kind of, and how they've scaled their business, using the now, new, next model, that I think was anchored and introduced in the preview. So really defining it. So if you were to really start your brand today and begin your awareness strategy, what should awareness do? It really drives the discovery of your business. As mentioned in that previous slide, we think it's about creating a meaningful first impression and overall experience for that consumer. And you'll hear this a lot today, and we'll share a lot of the reasons we're very passionate about it. It's really about understanding your audience as you're building that thoughtful strategy, what their journey looks like, and helping making sure you're building a strategy and campaigns that are reflective of that journey and their motivations or blockers.
So what we're talking here for the opportunities, back to basics here, right? Do we understand our users? Do we know their motivations? Are we just making assumptions that our stakeholders told us they wanted? Everyone says they do user journeys and personas. They're often out of date. They're often based on our assumptions and thoughts, not user needs. They're not relevant. What we're really saying here is, if you've done it, do more of it. Keep it relevant, keep it up to date. Does the experience really delight your users, or are you just trying to increase conversion? They're not mutually exclusive, but you don't want to be biased, one way or the other. And then mobile is key. There are many organizations that are not doing it well. Make it fast, make it optimized. Don't just say it works on a phone. That's not enough in today's market.
And also, once you get somebody, you have to really offer them a good experience. And I love these two first data points. They're actually provided by Google. The data they have shows that 53% of visits are abandoned if the page takes longer than 3 seconds to load. But on the other hand, and to be fair, the second stat is a couple of years old, but that's not that old. The average mobile web page takes 15.3 seconds to load. So that's a frightening pair of statistics to look at side by side like that. The other thing too, I've started here with a little bit of a mobile context, and that's because probably for all of you, most of the visits coming to your site are originating from a mobile device. Albeit by most, I do mean more than half, I don't mean all. And in fact, desktop still gets a significant percentage of visitors. And this last stat kind of brings home the point that desktop remains very, very important, because even though it might get to 40% of the visits, the conversion rate is much higher on the desktop. So you kind of have to pair those two things together and realize that you need to address this across both types of platforms.
Thanks, Eric. So before we dive into sharing some examples, we want to kind of anchor those examples. And as we see the landscape, really the table stakes, what we feel like is in the now, some new and emerging trends that we're seeing as it relates specifically to increasing awareness. And then next, who's really innovating, and what are some tangible examples of the ways they're doing that in the awareness space? So the examples that you'll see related to now, it's really, we mentioned this already, those that are and have done the journey and persona work and are acknowledging what those motivation and blockers are with their target market. They've got some marketing out in the wild, and whether that's via SEO or paid campaigns, et cetera, that they're testing that and vetting that audience. And then they're providing some, features that help remove, barrier to entry, et cetera. So you'll see us kind of talk through some of these examples. Now, when we talk about the new, that's taking a step further. So how we're viewing that is, these brands are starting to create a more personalized experience. They're also building in usability testing or user testing to really vet those audience segments and refine, right? So there's that constant feedback loop. And they're really thinking about optimized experiences by device. Who are the innovators and how are we categorizing them? Well, that gets more into a dedicated mobile experience. And an opportunity that we're actually seeing, and Grant will spend a lot of time on, is that it's hard to find examples of any one brand that's really crushing it in that mobile experience space. So there's a lot of opportunities there from a brand perspective. And then we also see a lot of opportunities in advanced technology, right? Taking that feedback loop a step farther and building in predictive modeling to predict more efficient and effective future outcomes, and leveraging AI in creative new ways to learn and help develop your marketing initiatives. So let's dive in. So the first example is Care of. And if you're in the social media space, you might have been hit with an ad or seen one of an influencer that you follow talking about this brand. So I think one of the things, again, their table stakes as a now example is that they understand at the core how their consumers feel about supplements. Buying supplements is kind of boring. So how can they disrupt the market? And what I think they did nicely was to generate some awareness and get their brand out there and really build, was they borrowed that brand credibility and authenticity from influencers that you've already invited into your feed to talk about what these supplements are, how they were different, etc. And they coupled that with a really nice first-time discount to remove the barrier to trial and buy a supplement online. The other piece that I think they did well that kind of bridges the next is their products are personalized. And I think that's a key point. Now, where we see room for improvement, and we'll talk about this a lot, is the mobile experience. Having built their brand largely in the social space and then predominantly mobile screen, there's a lot that they can do to improve their mobile experience to make it truly mobile first. So with that, I will pass it over to Eric, who's going to talk through the couple next examples that we have.
So I always like discussing Nerdwallet as an example of such an interesting case study. Actually, if you look over at the top right there, sharing a couple of charts from SEMrush, which shows that Nerdwallet, which is basically an affiliate site, has twice the traffic that Fidelity does, organic search traffic. And so it leads you to the question is, how could this possibly be? And I think one of the things that Nerdwallet has done incredibly well is they understand that the customer journey doesn't actually begin on their site. It begins somewhere else on the web, and they do a great job of leveraging search, both from a SEO and paid perspective, to reach out and connect with the customer right where they're expressing some of their needs, via Google. And so they do this with tremendous in-depth content, that, answering, literally tens of thousands of different flavors of user questions around finance. And they do a lot of other things really well too. A lot of great cross-linking and allowing people to find within their site the next piece of content, the next answer they're looking for. And given that they are an affiliate site, they do advertiser disclosure, incredibly important. So they take care of the trust issues right up front, and really strong mobile experience. I've scored them only as a now here because of some weaknesses. They actually are ignoring some SEO fundamentals. The site is slower than it should be. Readability scores are really important. If something is college level and you have a tired person who might be, a doctor of some discipline, but they're just tired. They're thinking like a 7-year-old, right? I mean, that's just our 7th grader. You got to write to the level where they currently are in the mindset that they have today. So in contrast, I offer REI, which what I really like about REI and why I'm sort of scoring them a little bit ahead of Nerdwallet is, well, I mean, the brand does matter. right? So it's great that Nerdwallet is crushing fidelity with not much of a known brand, but it's better still if you have a big brand and you have that great in-depth content, and they have a much stronger technical SEO foundation. They're handling schema really well. The readability scores are better. The navigation through the site is better. Still have things to improve. The site speed is still a bit slow, but REI is just doing a fantastic job of getting their message out in the way that consumers want to receive it across the web.
So I'll take the next one, Home Depot. And there's a lot that I love about Home Depot. I think the reason that we are placing them as new and taking and feel like they're taking a step beyond the now is they have a really deep understanding of their core audiences, and that's really reflective in how their site is built and the experiences they provide. But they've spent time and resources investing heavily in the technology that supports the journey. So that they were able to and ready to ride the wave this past year and a half with DIY exploding to create really personalized experiences and automations. And that starts even at that first digital front door on their homepage, based on what you've bought before or searched before. They're starting to provide those recommendations to you. They're really front and center in search queries as well. So again, that is where a lot of DIY or home purchases start, is in those search engines. And they've done a really nice job even in and I know this is bridging and an awareness, but in that cart checkout experience as well. Again, there are areas for improvement because of the large inventory they have. As you start to filter things within that experience, it can get a little clunky. And we feel like the biggest miss, especially, is this whole notion of value exchange and first-party data, and really needing to become more first-party data reliant. The miss is that they're not engaging, and they don't have a lot of messaging about installing their app and having that be at their audience's fingertips. And so we feel like that getting that messaging front and center could be a real game changer for them in the future. Now, with that, I'll kick it over to Grant.
Hey, and I get to do the next. So I get the cool one. So Starbucks did a lot of work during COVID. One thing that was interesting is many businesses went through. They went from not just finding digital supported them, they became to rely on it, which was, quite a game changer. They already had an app, they already had a website. They improved their progressive web app, which is a technology that lets you take advantage of features on the device. So you can do things like push notification on Android. You can have local data, so it performs well. What they really did is they gave you a mobile experience that felt like an app. It's really fast. It's personalized, so it knows what I want to do. I can pick my drink. I can customize it. I can check out. It's very minimal. I can go pick it up at the store. It feels like an app, even if I have the app installed. And when I use it, I don't feel like it's good for a mobile site, right? I'm not talking about it like it's a compromise. I kind of just say it works. And I'm not really aware of the fact that it's just as easy to perform the task I want to perform on my phone as on my desktop. From an improvement perspective, small things. There's no guest checkout, which is probably, mainly a business decision. So, there's no ability to really personalize unless I'm logged in. There's no push to the mobile app. Again, that may be a business decision. I would say on Android devices, the web experience actually is faster than the app, which is surprising but good. But overall, really leading the pack in terms of a mobile experience through a web browser.
So now leading into the why, and why we think it's so critical to focus on increasing awareness as it relates to that experience-driven commerce. We saw in the past year online spend surge And the data is now showing that there was about a 44% year-over-year increase in annual revenue, and that's greater than the last 2 decades. The so what there is that now as we enter this next normal or new normal, what we're finding even in some of the research that we've collected and done in the last 6 months and are starting this to synthesize is that what brands did and invested out of necessity in some cases to survive, they saw those investments in the commerce space really pay off. And so even though there might be some normalizing, right, and rescaling, that commerce piece of their business is not going away. And so it's really important that it stays front and center in the conversation.
And then, just building on top of what Leanne just talked about, what happens is a lot of brands invest all this energy in the experience on a website, but the experience really begins for the customer before your website. It begins in the search engine, it begins on other sites when they first become aware of you. And it's really important to get this part of the picture and address it really well. So not only are you present in those other places, but you're very thoughtful about the messaging and the kinds of approaches you use on, within the search engines or on the other websites where you might be buying media, and the other tactics you're using to use people wherever they might be, social media, et cetera. So getting all of that is what really gives you a really strong growth opportunity and forms that first impression of who you are as a brand and how you might be able to meet their needs and wants. And of course, since people rarely jump to buying the first time they see you, you got to stay top of mind by getting in front of them on a repeat basis in order to finally bring them over to your website where you can take on the next stage of the magic of converting them into a customer.
Thanks, Eric. And you did a nice job of hitting some of the points on this slide. So just breaking down, the next 2 slides talk from a business perspective. What are the benefits that we see of really being thoughtful about your awareness strategy, and then the consumer benefits. So from a brand and customer perspective, it is all about acquiring new customers. Really creating that experience that Eric mentioned in relevant spaces and being able to test in a controlled way, mitigating risk, new markets for growth. The level down of how can you, at an awareness stage, learn, right, and understand how you're going to impact your bottom line. We think at the awareness stage, you can start to really understand that value exchange as that becomes more and more important. And we feel like consumers are going to start to evaluate that more as you see more and more people asking for people to log in or provide their information to generate more first-party data. It's knowing what is of value to your customers and helping create and understand new market opportunities. Being thoughtful about the information that you're asking for and understanding what data is you need to have in order to understand how you can improve targeting and really being conscious about that value exchange. And then I didn't know if Grant, if you want to touch on the bottom half.
Yeah,
pass it over.
Yeah, real quick. I just say make it fast, right? If you engage me longer, if you personalize it well, if it's efficient, I'm going to stick around. If you don't do any of those things, I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm either going to go to a competitor. If you're lucky, I'll go to my desktop. But ultimately, it can't be slow. It's got to work on the device I'm on, whether it's my tablet, my phone, my desktop. You've got to engage me longer, and you've got to make it relevant to me.
And I think the customer benefit is really simple. And we've hit on it throughout these slides, is that when you're really thoughtful about how you're trying to create that first impression, it allows customers to discover brands that align with what they're looking for, either from a wants, needs, and values perspective, and gives you the at-bats that you want. So now we're going to transition to the how. So some of the meat of the conversation that will take us into the roundtable. So I'll kick it over to Eric.
Yeah, and I think key to all of this is really understanding what those pain points are and what the overall journey looks like, and knowing that it's a multi-stage process, as we've all talked about, and providing consistent experiences through each stage of the process, starting out on the wild web before they get to you, but being consistent when it comes over, to the site. And, what are the sites that they are on, and understanding what that is, and what are the search queries they use, and these kinds of things end up really being really important. And then as you're doing that, you can make the decisions on what channels you want to use, what the messaging is, how you want to monitor and measure that over time. But it all has to come from that consumer perspective to work with a complete and thorough understanding of that throughout the whole process.
So then from a business perspective, how, right? Like, how do you ensure you're building a thoughtful awareness strategy? We took the time to kind of break down a people, process, and technology, the core capabilities that we feel like brands need to start evaluating how they'll plan for if they're not quite there. So each one of us is going to kind of hit on the main points of each one of these columns before we open it up for conversation. So Eric, do you want to jump in on the people?
Sure, and I think this is consistent with what I've been talking about throughout the process of this session together. But understanding the people and the experiences they're looking for. There's a lot of strategic planning that goes into that. You have to map out the overall strategy. You're planning your media, where you're buying. Strong SEO is a big key of that. Having the right creative, the right design. All these, mobile is obviously very big here. All of this is part of just having a complete view of the people and the experience so that you can deliver what you need to deliver.
So from a process perspective, just to piggyback on what Eric said, we think from a capabilities perspective, you need to have processes in place, right? Start to finish, that allow you and support what Eric was saying. So making sure from a business perspective, you understand what are the success metrics, what are the things we need to measure and hit on when we're embarking on growth and trying to drive awareness, and being methodical about that, building out a channel plan, right? Thinking about the different touch points that make sense, how you will measure those, how you'll test and create that feedback loop. What is if you need to know more about your audience and core targets, making sure you embark on, developing or refining journeys, personas, or putting some research in place to really understand that, and whether that's online or focus groups or what have you. And then starting to develop a process for how you will understand the role of communication at the awareness stage to build out your messaging and consider, again, I know I've talked on this a little bit, that value exchange, what data you need to be successful, to then ask, and what's the consumer benefit of that? And lastly, it's really about making sure as you're collecting that data that you have a plan for it, right? You understand how your different platforms map to one another, and how you'll keep that data clean for the long term.
Yeah, I'll touch real quick on tech. So performance testing, right? Automate it, build it into your systems, do it in real time, define KPIs for it, right? So ultimately, a lot of companies will test something when it's launched for the number of users they expect, and then very rarely test until there's a problem. What devices am I expecting people to visit on? What bandwidth do I expect them to have when they visit? What latency do I find acceptable? continuously improve it, predict it, monitor it, right? Ultimately, I don't want a call that says, hey, the site sucks. You kind of want to know ahead of time that there's performance issues and that you can continuously improve it. If I built my website and I tested on a desktop with, fiber-based connectivity, that's probably not real world for my users that are out there. Collect feedback, find out what users find is frustrating, what's inefficient, what could be improved. A lot of organizations do this during the design and build phase and then start looking at new features. What about the features you already built? Did they meet the goals you expected? How do you know that users are enjoying using those features and it's working well? Do it with tools that you can integrate with your site, so it's some of that collection is automated, but also do it with real users. Talk to your users. Go continuously user test. See what could be better. Don't, just because you spent the money once doesn't mean that it's perfect and it couldn't be improved. And sometimes you miss the mark, so you've got to go back. Using personalization platforms for personalization instead of trying to invent it yourself is pretty obvious. But plan for those outcomes during your design phase and as you improve your experience. Don't just do it at the beginning, or don't just do it at the end, because a lot of times the experience and the design that you have is heavily impacted by how personalization is done. A lot of times something is designed where it's very difficult to personalize, or it looks like it was bolted on because you put some personalization over to the right that nobody ever looks at on the screen. The continuous improvement, right, is a pretty obvious one, but we see a lot of sites are built and left for a long time, right, before anything is improved. You've got to be looking regularly if you want to be at the top of the game. And then finally, using mobile frameworks, it reduces your investment, it reduces your cost. Using design systems so you've got repeatable experiences instead of inventing it all the time. And it also feels more familiar to your users. They don't have to learn something, it's intuitive and they get it.
And then we'll just close with, before we open the floor, a lot of what we've talked about today, Perficient does have offers that can help support brands kind of work through some of these components of their business, whether that's, helping build, the very high level digital marketing strategy and help roadmap that, or specific pieces like a mobile IQ or a CX amp. Or a SEO health assessment, things like that. And we work cross business units to make sure that whatever offering is custom and unique to our brand's needs.